Joined now by Senator Scott Ryan, a Victorian Liberal Party Senator. Good morning, Senator.
Morning, Chris.
Now, you would have been in question time on Tuesday when David Johnson let fly at the Australian Submarine Corporation, saying he wouldn't trust them to build a canoe. What went through your mind when you heard him say that?
Well, it was towards the end of question time. I mean, if we put Labor's confected outrage to one side, one can't dismiss that there have been issues with ASC, and the Minister was pointing out some of those issues with respect to the cost and delivery of the air warfare destroyers.
That's true. Over time, over budget, he said maybe $350 million with the air warfare destroyers. Even so, is it acceptable for a minister to so publicly use Parliament to bag a major Australian company, a major defence contractor?
Well, he also said it could be up to $600 million, and he wasn't quite sure because there was data was lacking. So I don't think we can just dismiss the issue of cost overruns and delivery of projects, and I think that's the point the Minister was making. The Prime Minister also made clear that ASC is an important part of our defence infrastructure and has an important role to play. So I don't think it's particularly helpful to get hung up on one word here. The point is that there are some challenges with this particular project, the air warfare destroyers the Minister was outlining, but ASC has a role going forward.
This is a corporation set up by the government. It's an integral part of our defence capability. Isn't the government, therefore, partly responsible to how it performs? I mean, that's
exactly what the Minister was saying. I mean, I think, to be fair, we've been in office for 15 months, and the government and the Minister have commissioned reports into the performance of ASC. We're doing exactly that. The government is taking responsibility for ASC, but being a government-owned corporation doesn't exempt one from criticism either.
But 15 months into government and you still don't know what the cost overrun, whether it's $350 or $600 million?
I think, to be fair, if we look at the history of defence procurement all around the world, it's a very challenging area. There were issues with the Collins-class submarines that the Howard government was dealing with years after their commissioning. So without trying to imitate the confected outrage of Labor on this as they sort of seek to make political mileage, there is an issue with this project. The Minister was outlining how he was handling it and some of the challenges that remain.
So we've had this debate unfolding in the last few months about where the next generation of Australian submarines should be built, and it's been flagged that we may buy submarines, say, from Japan. There's a lot of people coming out saying, hey, no, we could do it better, cheaper in South Australia. Is the Minister, in a sense, done us a favour by blowing the lid off what's been happening with the Submarine Corporation and more or less explains why the government is looking overseas for the next generation?
Well, no, I think the point is that we have to ensure that they are affordable, that the project is delivered on time. Promises matter, but so does track record. And importantly, it's a defence project. It's not an employment project. Now, that isn't meant to rule anything in or out. It simply says we're going to commission what is in Australia's national interest from the point of view of our overall defence strategy. That includes capability in Australia, but it also includes cost, reliability, and considering track record as well as promises.
Does the Minister, though, you think, need to, if not back away from his criticism of the corporation, maybe apologise for his choice of words?
Well, look, I think in this building people get hung up on a word or two as Labor's trying to confect outrage and make political mileage. No one can deny that there have been issues with the delivery of the air warfare destroyer project. No one can deny that Labor stripped more than $10 billion out of defence. This government's taken responsibility for it, but particularly with defence procurement, these are not issues that can be turned around in a matter of months.
Moving on, Independent Senator David Leyonhjelm's going to introduce a private member's bill to legalise same-sex marriage. Is it time for the Liberal Party to allow a conscience vote on this issue?
Well, let's get this point clear, which the media often forget. Every single vote for every member of the Liberal Party is a conscience vote. There is no rule in the Liberal Party that someone cannot cross the floor. It's not like Labor, where you're bound by caucus, and the minute you disagree with caucus publicly in a parliamentary vote, you're expelled from the Labor Party. The only rule in the Liberal Party is that members of the front bench, the ministry or the shadow ministry, are required to support party decisions. So every vote is a conscience vote.
So that doesn't quite ring true to me. Why would you have a policy and go to the public and say we have a policy if you can't guarantee that the members of your party are going to support it.
It is a founding tenet of the Liberal Party that members of the parliamentary party are free to vote their conscience. That's an important point. What you're asking, I think, is the Liberal Party has a policy to support marriage as it currently stands, and that remains party policy.
So, if this is voted on in the Senate, you would expect some of your colleagues in the Liberal Party to support David Leyonhjelm's bill to legalise same-sex marriage?
I can't speak on behalf of any of my colleagues. If the Liberal Party was to change its policy, there's a party room process for dealing with that. It's not on the agenda at the moment. There are a lot of private senators' bills introduced into the Senate, and very few of them actually reach a vote because there is a limited amount of private senators' time.
I mean, I would find it myself, if I were a Liberal Party senator, that if my conscience told me to, okay, maybe I might vote for a bill like this. But if I was equivocating a bit, I would think, look, no, I don't want to embarrass the party leadership. I don't want to embarrass the Prime Minister. That's different from the Prime Minister saying, look, everyone, this is a conscious vote how your conscience dictates.
If the Liberal Party was to change its position and effectively allow a free vote, there's a party room process for dealing with that, but we tend to deal with it when issues are going to come to a vote in Parliament, and there's no indication as yet as to when this bill will come to a vote.
Okay, now, if we move on, just an overview, if you like, of how the government is travelling. Now, it has been behind in the polls for some time, and it has this continuing problem with the budget. Now, by one calculation, there may only be as little as 5 weeks of parliamentary sitting before the next budget in May next year. Now, I'm not sure if that's right or not, and of course you can schedule additional weeks. Is it time really to put the budget to rest at least before the end of this parliamentary year, to accept that some things simply won't get passed, to modify others so they will be passed?
Well, the media in this building tends to focus a bit on the negative. Let's look at what has happened over the course of the year. Since the Senate changed in July, before that, remember, Labor and the Greens could and did block everything. They thought they were still in government. They weren't helping us fix the problem they created. Since July, we've abolished the carbon tax, we've abolished the mining tax, two explicit promises to the highest priorities of this government. Our border protection policies have proven to be successful and stop the flow of illegal immigration. So, in my view, the government has had a successful year. But let's also be honest and say we've got a budget challenge. Now, when you say there's a problem with the budget, I'll agree with you, because there's actually a budget deficit that's been left. Not only are Labor and the Greens stopping us fix the budget deficit that they left us, they're actually stopping us implementing the announcements that the Labor Party made themselves before the election. So Labor's stopping us implementing their promises that would have helped a little bit in terms of balancing the budget. The challenge is in addressing the deficit, and that's a challenge to which the government remains committed.
The government, though, is, according to the opinion polls, struggling. What do you think it needs to do to get back on track? What does it need to say to the Australian people to convince them that you're governing well? Because that doesn't seem to be cutting through at the moment.
Less than halfway through a term of office, I'm not going to be looking over my shoulder at opinion polls. We're going to actually do what we said we would do, and particularly key to that is to bring the budget back into a sustainable situation. We never said that would be easy. We knew there would be very difficult decisions that had to be taken. We're committed to prosecuting the case publicly for everyone to actually take a small hit, for everyone to make a sacrifice, because the budget in its form inherited from the Labor Party is unsustainable. And that isn't always going to be popular, but we're not going to judge the success of our measures solely by how it's reflected in a poll. We're going to judge them by the success of how they achieve our objectives, in this case, making the budget sustainable.
So in your opinion, policies like, say, the GP co-payment or the paid parental leave scheme shouldn't be taken off the table, that your government should press ahead with them into the new year? Well,
I think there's always a judgment to be made about you seek public support for measures, you seek parliamentary support for measures. At some point, you may have to compromise on those, and we've shown a willingness to do that. For example, on the mining tax repeal, we had to compromise on some of the things we initially stated. So we're still in discussions with all the crossbenchers about our priorities, and we have indicated that we are willing to negotiate, because it's the core of our agenda is to bring the budget back into a sustainable situation to grow the economy. And we'll continue to talk to the crossbenchers about that as long as Labor and the Greens continue to be belligerent.
That budget task does seem to be getting more difficult because of things like falling iron ore prices, etc. Are you expecting that the FO might be a bit of a political train wreck, or on the other hand, do you think it might, in fact, strengthen the government's arm? Make your arguments all the more compelling.
I actually think when people see the truth of the budget situation, as they do every 6 months under us, where we have reliable forecasts, and my EFO will come out likely in December, that actually generates support for our agenda, because the Australian people know they cannot keep borrowing tens of billions of dollars a year, which effectively their children are going to have to pay back in higher taxes or lower services. They know that is not sustainable. So I think publication of the changes and the impact of Labor blocking budget balancing efforts will actually generate support for the government.
Okay, now you're a Victorian senator, you know Victorian politics much better than I do, or most people in this building. There's a state election this weekend. What messages should federal politics and federal politicians take out of this election in Victoria?
Well, 2 out of the last 4 Victorian elections have been decided by one seat. 1999 and 2010. Every election is a fresh contest for the public's support. The key thing in Victoria this weekend is do the people of Victoria have a choice, which is to continue with a government that has the single biggest infrastructure investment plan in the history of the state of Victoria, or at the very least since the 1950s, or to go back to a government made up of the same personnel from the Braxton-Brumby era that has no plan, that has strong links to organisations like the CFMEU that are under constant prosecutorial action in our courts, and the risk that poses for Victoria. So
what lesson should we take if the people of Victoria choose that second option, the Labor government, the Labor Party that you portray as being so unattractive?
Well, I think every election is a fresh contest. Every election, particularly in the modern era, is about seeking the public's support for your agenda and seeking a mandate to implement it. I don't think there's any particular lesson other than that. But politics these days is about seeking that support from the people for your agenda. Other than that, I don't think there's a particular lesson.
Okay. Senator Scott Ryan, thanks for your time today.
Thanks, Chris.